thought I'd include a bonus module at this point of the course to show a load of new features in Live 9 that allow you to take various processing techniques taught so far on the course a stage further. So I'm going to start with the garage audio loop I've got here from the Live library, which is setting the tone for my track with a nice groove being made by the kick, cymbals and rimshot. On the MIDI track alongside, I've got a drum rack, which I've dragged some individual drum hits from the Live drum browser into. I've got a kick and hat on the first two pads. So I'm going to add to the garage loop now by creating the standard 4/4 house pattern. But it's kind of boring as it is. So to create more variation, I'll first double the pattern to 2 bars using the duplicate loop switch in the editor. And then I'll move some kicks around and create some new ones to make the pattern more unique. I just wanted to make a few changes to the garage loop before continuing, as the sound needs a bit of adjusting. Firstly, as the loop is being slowed down a fair bit from its original tempo, you can hear it's degrading the signal. So to sort that, I'm going to change the warp mode. I could try complex, but as it's drums, I'm just going to use repitch. And the other thing I want to do is to adjust the levels, as the bassier drum is coming through a bit too much, as you can see by the loud transients in the waveform here. So I'm going to need to slice the clip to a new MIDI track. But before that, I'm going to have to create a new audio file for the loop with the adjusted pitch settings. So I'll freeze and then flatten the clip first. Then slice it up into a new drum rack track. And then what I can do is find the slices for those drums on the mixer and bring the tracks down a little to get the mix the way I want. So I'm liking the feel of that now, but what I'm going to do is bring these drum tracks together with some processing. And the way I'll do this is using the new Glue Compressor effect. So I'm grouping the 2 tracks and adding the compressor to the group track. And I'm going to drag EQ8 onto it as well, as I want to show you what's new there and how it can really help you when mixing your tracks. The main update to the EQ is that you can now see the signal on the EQ display. So there's no need to use the spectrum analyzer effect on the track, which is a great update. And this also means I can more easily demonstrate the effect of the compressor on the spectrum too. So if I lower the threshold now, watch what happens to the frequencies in the signal, as well as listening to how it sounds. So the drums sound nicely fused by the effect, but the spectrum's been affected quite a lot. With the lowest frequencies in the signal having the highest levels, the compressor acts the most on those. So you get the bass being reduced a lot more than the upper frequencies, now being around 6 dB quieter, so half as loud. So if I bring the gain up around 6 dB now, then the bass should be restored. However, it does sound a little less bassy than it did, And the reason for this is that the upper frequencies are all a fair bit louder than they were. So what I'll do is work on the bottom end a bit by first adding a high pass filter, just to remove the very bottom sub-frequencies. And then I'll add a bit of a band boost around 60 or 70 Hz to beef it up. I can also hear a slight resonance going on in the kick, which I can pick out the exact frequency of by first boosting the band. And then I'll bring the band down to get rid of it. And lastly, what I might do is pick the rim out of the mix a bit too. Conveniently, the display shows me where the rim is. So I can use band 5 to set a slightly wider band boost across that area to bring its frequencies up a bit. So these two effects have really helped to bring the drums together and get the sound the way I wanted, whilst keeping the dynamics nicely under control. I've added a bass track to this now, which is the house bass preset from the Live Sounds bass category. And I've got a clip playing a repeating C. But I want to add some automation to the pitch bend so it transposes at the end of the 4 bars. So I'm choosing pitch bend from the MIDI control list, and then I can edit the curve at the end of the clip. I'll loop that section first, and then I'll add some breakpoints and drag them around so that the pitch goes up and then down. In order to get the pitch of the upper and lower shifts right, I can hold down the shift key and then drag the curve between the points up or down until it sounds the way I want. And a cool new feature here is the ability to have non-linear slopes between points, which are created by holding down the Alt or Option key and then dragging with the mouse to make the slope more exponential. So once I've got the pattern playing the way I want it, I can use the same curve on a clip I've got playing on the track alongside, which has sampler on it, playing a pad sample with some filter enveloping. So this is adding some nice higher frequency textures and harmony to the bass sound. Now to copy the pitch bend curve over to that clip, I just select all in the editor of the first clip and hit copy, then go to the other clip and make sure pitch bend is selected there too, then hit paste, after which both parts will be pitch shifting in the same way. The other thing I might want to do is to add some additional layering of this part to fatten up the bottom end. So I'm inserting a new MIDI track here, and then going to the browser and typing sub into the search field. Then I'll pick one from the bass folder, like perhaps the clicky bass, so we get more sharpness at the top end as well. If I copy the clip over to that track now too, then you can hear how it adds more bassiness and other nice frequencies to the sound. The pitch bend slide isn't quite right though, so I'm going to need to adjust that to 5 semitones rather than 2, so it's in tune with the other parts. I've got another pad sound in the set now, and I've copied across the MIDI clip from my bass tracks, only I've changed it to a single sustained note of C, rather than lots of repeating notes. And as you can see, the sample has got a loop in it to make sure it continues to sound across the 4 bars. So we get a continuous pad line. But we've also got the pitch bend happening at the end of the phrase, as on the bass tracks. What I might like to do then is to add a bit of sidechaining so that the pad isn't sounding the whole time, but works with the other parts in the track to create some more dynamics to it. So I'm adding a compressor here and turning on sidechaining and setting the source to the kick in my drum rack. Apart from improving the compressor algorithm, the other thing Ableton have done to the effect here is to improve its display capabilities once again, where if I click on the waveform switch, I now get a view of the sidechain source, which you can see is the kick, represented by the grey area at the bottom. And what we have at the top here is a yellow line showing the gain reduction occurring, which at the moment is nothing. But if I bring down the threshold, which is the orange line below, then you can see the kick peaks start to create dips in the pad level, which increase the lower the threshold goes. And the cool thing is, it even shows you when you're getting small fluctuations in the signal caused by the compressor settings being a bit too severe, which are quite hard to hear on their own, but do degrade the signal. But if I increase the release time a little, you can see the curve smooths out. I don't want to increase it so much that the level doesn't rise back up to an uncompressed state between kicks though. And I can bring up the ratio a little too if I want the level dips to be even larger. So this is another really useful display. And if I add a low pass filter to this now, and set up the same sidechaining with the kick, only I actually want the modulation to work the other way, with the kick bringing the filter cutoff down rather than up. Then you can see how this curve now shows me the level of the cutoff too, as the modulation effect is basically the same. So this has given me a nice track here to again layer with the bass, or perhaps use on its own for an intro or during breaks. I thought the track might benefit from another cymbal, so I've added a ride part to the drums clip now, which I've got on every quaver, with the odd semi-quaver in between, filling it out a bit more, and adding some variation to the pattern. I've got it quite low in the mix, as it only needs to be subtle. But one thing I need to do is to change the timing a little. This is something you should always be aware of when using drum loops in your track, as they often have slight differences in timing that may clash with parts you've sequenced yourself. For example, the garage loop has a bit of shuffle to it, meaning the notes towards the end here are slightly lazy or swung. So what I can do is extract the groove from the loop, and then find it in the groove pool and drag it to my drums clip. You can hear then if I bring the timing parameter on the groove up and down to bring its effect in and out, or it correctly aligns the ride cymbals with the garage loop to bring them together nicely at the end of the 4-bar phrase. and you can add that same groove to other parts like the bass if you want to unify the track even more. I've got another synth part in the track now, and it's an operator preset from the live library called Square Sweep. I'm triggering this with a 1-bar clip, which is simply playing a sustained note of C again. What I'm going to do though is add a very cool Max for Live audio effect called LFO to the track. This effect is a low frequency oscillator, like we started to look at in the beginner's course, and we'll be looking at a lot more in the advanced synthesizer modules later on. This is basically an oscillator which has a frequency that's too low to hear, but a level that can be used to modulate any other parameter on the track to create audible effects. For example, if I click on the map switch so that it flashes, and then click on the fader for the track, you'll hear and see how it then modulates the track level up and down. I'll bring the depth down a bit so the effect isn't quite so large. And we can then synchronize the rate if we want to, and then change the rate as well as the waveform to create different rhythmic effects. If the timing is slightly out, then the phase amount can be adjusted to correct this. The thing to remember here is that you can no longer set the level of the track using the fader, as it's being modulated. So you need to use the offset control if you want to bring the volume up or down. I thought I'd add even more interest to the track now, by applying some identical modulation to the frequencies in the track too. So I've now added EQ8 to the track, and I've got 3 very high Q, so narrow bandwidth bands, targeting the fundamental frequency in the track, and a couple of the harmonics. Then what I can do is to copy the LFO effect over, so there are 2 now, but then get rid of the volume here, and instead change the modulation target to the scale amount of the EQ, which then brings the level of the bands up and down. Once again, the depth and offset controls can be adjusted to make the amount of modulation the way you want. And lastly, I think I'll add a gate to the track, just so it's not sounding the whole time again. And I'll sidechain it with the bass sound. Then I'll bring down the threshold until the gate is being triggered by the bass. So you can see we also have an improved display on the gate to show the effect that it's having, and to make it easier for parameters to be set. Right now the gate is being opened by the bass, making the 2 parts sound at the same time. But I can also flip it so that it works more like an extreme sidechained compressor, ducking the level by a large amount when the bass hits. I'll bring up the floor so it's not cutting the level by quite so much. And also increase the release amount so the level doesn't jump back up so fast. Once again, the display shows how fast the gate is reopening by the white line running across it. So if I increase the release now, you can see the white line's peaks get closer to the next bass hit. And the gain reduction meter looks a lot like our Sidechain compressor track now, only we're using the bass track rather than the kick here. So now we've got another part being modulated in some interesting ways to create some cool rhythmic variation and dynamics in the track. The last thing I want to cover in this lesson is session view automation, as this is now possible in Live 9. This means that you can record parameter tweaks on any devices on tracks into clips in the session view grid, as well as onto lanes in the arrangement. This is done via a second record switch, named Session Record, which you can activate to start recording into armed tracks. There's actually a preference, however, that selects whether automation is recorded on just armed tracks or all tracks, so you can set that how you like. What I want to do is to record some filter automation to all our bass parts. So I need to use another technique from earlier in the course, and that's using a dummy clip. First up, I'll add a new audio track to the set and name it Bass Dummy. Then I'll route the bass group to it, and set the track to Input Monitor, so I can hear the bass group routing through the channel. Now I need to add my dummy clip to the track, which, if you remember, is just a silent audio clip. So you could easily just use any audio clip for this, with the clip gain turned down. But I've dragged this out of the Live 8 library, and created a 4-bar looping clip with it. Then dragged it into the Live 9 user library, so I can find it there whenever I need it. And now I'm going to add a filter to the track. And then, to automate the filter across the 4 bars, I just need to make sure the track is record armed, then hit the session record switch and tweak the filter as I like. I think I'm going to start laying out the track now. So I'm going to hit record and jam with these clips to get something into the arrangement. Hopefully, that's given you a nice insight to some of the new features in Live 9 and helped to reinforce what you've learned so far on the course. Before moving on to the next lesson, try some of the techniques I've just shown you in your own tracks, and have a play around with this live set if you want to take a closer look at what I've done. If you have any questions about anything, then hit me up on the forum or email. In the next lesson, we're going to be taking a more detailed look at Sampler. See you then.